But before we move on to that, we need to talk about our little incel boy, Syril Karn. His time on Gorman, as he realizes what's about to happen to its people, marks the first crack in his blind devotion to the Empire. For the first time, he looks at the people he's helped oppress and recognizes their humanity.
Then have a good look.
I think there's a way out of this before things go too far. My people are convinced you're being coordinated by outside agitators. If I had something to offer, if we could lay this off on outsiders, then...
There's a haunting moment in the episode where he walks away from Imperial protection to stand in the middle of the violence he helped create, finally forced to confront the lie of justice and order that he's clung to since childhood. It's a moment that's earned him sympathy from critics, fans, even Tony Gilroy, who said,
"The fundamental lies that he's been told from the very beginning, they're crushing. I feel terribly sorry for Syril."
And yes, Syril is a victim of indoctrination, toxic masculinity, a state that taught him obedience was worth. But we have to be careful with that sympathy and how far we extend it. I've seen countless think pieces lament Syril Karn's fate, wishing he had survived because he could have been saved, that he could have earned redemption if he had just gotten a few more episodes on the show. But many of these think pieces rarely fully reckon with the fact that first and foremost, Syril was a fascist bully right from the start. In Season 1, he used his tiny scrap of minuscule authority over the people of Ferrix to brutalize them, getting numerous people killed in the pursuit of the fantasy of heroism. When he later witnessed the Empire's brutality on Ferrix, he didn't flinch, just saving the girl, because those working class, mostly people of color, didn't look, act, or appear like him. It's only on Gorman, among people he could aesthetically relate to as upper class, as the right kind of people, did the violence against them finally feel real. Even Tony Gilroy admitted this.
Gorman, the clothes, the structure of it, the properness of it, I think Syril really started to feel, look comfortable in Gorman.
Syril finally recognized suffering once it wore the right clothes, spoke in the right way, and looked like someone who could belong. Meanwhile, the Empire hasn't hidden the fact that it committed genocide against numerous people, the Kaminoans, the Geonosians, and countless others, none of which shook Cyril's faith because he just went along with the Imperial narrative.
Service to the Empire. You just said it. Can one ever be too aggressive in preserving order?
He was perfectly content to uphold Imperial order as long as the victims were distant, alien, or othered. And he didn't have to question the narrative that he was fed, when he very easily could have looked into it. This mirrors how our culture processes violence. Genocide often only becomes legible when its victims are relatable, when they look like us. Western media dehumanizes brown, black, and Muslim lives until their deaths don't register as tragedy, only as unfortunate consequences of conflict, quote unquote. Hell, within the queer community, people often rarely care for black and brown trans people who get killed. But when upper-class white trans women is the victim of violence, that is when people maybe might pay attention. And even when Syril is finally confronted with the truth of the Empire's violence, Cyril's response isn't self-reflection, it's rage.
How long?
We can discuss this later.
Which, as an immediate response, is understandable, considering how he's been directly used by not only his own girlfriend, but the system that he's given his life to. But what's telling is how he directs that emotion. He chokes Dedra in a moment that disturbingly echoes domestic abuse.
You're hurting me.
And you were going to tell me what the mining ships are doing here.
Yes, he's right to be angry at her. She manipulated him, used him. But his rage here is not about getting back at her, it's about reasserting his control.
You tell me it's a rumor, and I will throw you out that window. What have we been doing here?
His masculinity, his sense of order, his fantasy of mattering is shattered. So he reasserts dominance by enacting violence against a woman he once stalked and fantasized about. It's a manifestation of how he views women, not as people, but as objects he can use to channel his emotions. Even in the chaos of Gorman's massacre, his fury isn't aimed at Imperial soldiers or the architects of genocide, it's unleashed on Cassian, his original obsession, the man who shattered his delusions of heroism all the way back on Ferrix. Syril's final act isn't fighting to save others, it's a desperate, childish attempt to reassert his heroism during a genocide he helped enable against a man who is trying to stop it. Syril doesn't die a hero, he's not on some hero's journey, he dies trying to reclaim the narrative in his head, violently lashing out at a woman and a man of color, the very people dehumanized by the system that he continually, endlessly chose to serve. Yes, Syril is a victim. He was radicalized by propaganda, shaped by a mother who weaponized his masculinity, and molded by a system that taught him obedience was righteousness. But none of that excuses his own choices. He actively bullied, harmed, and upheld fascism on Ferrix, on Gorman, politically and personally. His betrayal of the Gore, even if not fully informed, was still a decision, one that he chose willingly to take part in. It was yet another chance to choose differently, and he didn't. It's why Ryland's line to him,
"Makes you no harm." How do you say that? How do you speak the words? You've destroyed us.
I was here to trap outside agitators.
Are you mad? That I'd believe that? That it's worth saying? What kind of a being are you?
cut so deeply. Syril is trying to deflect responsibility, but he's complicit. He always was. Star Wars has a long, troubling history of sanitizing fascist men. Look at Kylo Ren or Darth Vader. Men who committed numerous violences, including being complicit in enabling genocides, then dying doing one good thing for someone that they personally loved and cared about. And they are instantly, in the narrative's eyes and in many people's eyes, redeemed. As Princess Weeks brilliantly pointed out in a video that I highly recommend you check out, Star Wars rarely interrogates complicity. It gestures at atonement, but skips to absolution. One moment of decency is treated like it balances out a lifetime of systemic harm. It's upsetting, and it's cultural. Because our culture regularly crafts these narratives. Speaking of Syril Karn, I saw numerous posts, one with over 8,000 likes, describing Syril's assault on Dedra as him physically and morally confronting her fascism, sidestepping the fact that it was a misogynistic outburst and not a moral stand. Others framed his attack on Cassian at the end as simply protecting his woman Dedra from an assassination attempt, which has no basis in reality. He had no idea what Cassian was there to do, he was just reasserting control through violence. And even if he had been trying to save, quote-unquote, his woman, it wouldn't have absolved him of his complicity in what happened on Gorman. But the fact that even that is argued to be seen as heroic on his part shows how much we follow the same tired script we hand to men over and over again. Prove your worth by saving the girl, die a noble death, and let that wipe the slate clean. Rather than teaching men to be more like Cassian, soft, caring, vulnerable, supportive, and yet still willing to fight for others. But our culture is primed to continually empathize with these men who cause harm, to write their redemption arcs before they even attempt to earn them. Like how we're told we can't ruin the future of young men who rape. We hand them the benefit of the doubt while erasing their culpability in violence against people who are often systemically dehumanized or objectified. Our culture mourns Syril as a wasted opportunity, while people like Cinta, who resisted the Empire her entire life, dies with barely a mention after that. No trending discourses, no wishful what-ifs, no fan debates or articles over the potential of her arc had she not been killed. Syril's death is treated as a tragedy of a life cut short. Cinta's death is treated like an inevitability by everyone. Even Tony Gilroy, who created both, speaks at length about how sorry he feels for Syril in interviews, and interviewers continually ask him about him, but he barely ever mentions Cinta. And it reflects whose pain we prioritize, who we're trained in our culture to empathize with. We extend endless sympathy to men like Syril, to Kylo Ren, to Anakin Skywalker, to white men, or to the powerful. Our culture constantly spins stories about whether they can be saved. What if they come around? What if they didn't mean it? What if they feel bad? That question, can they be redeemed, often itself becomes a trap too. It lets us delay judgment, delay accountability, delay action. It tells us to wait, to hold space, to keep hoping for someone else's moral clarity, while they help enable real harm happening in real time. That empathy rarely exists for queer people, BIPOC, women, for women of color like Cinta, for anyone outside that familiar silhouette of the troubled person who might still be good. And it's not just fiction. Figures like transphobic billionaire and Severus Snape Redeemer-in-Chief J.K. Rowling get this all the time. What if she changes her mind? What if she apologizes? Are things that I hear continuously when I talk about what she's doing to trans people. I and so many others, including those close to her, tried to reach out to her, but she made the choice over and over and over and over again, every single day, to continue to use her money and influence to push legislation that harms trans people, women, immigrants, asexuals, numerous other folks, those already being targeted, already dying. This isn't abstract. This is now. And I'm not going to sit quietly around and hope that maybe someday she and other people causing harm will come around one day. Fuck that. You don't wait for power to find empathy. You fight back. And if one day it finally affects her, if she turns her back on the machine she helped build, do you really believe that means that she changed? Or just that fascism finally touched someone she cared about? Syril could have chosen a different path. He had chances. Many. But maybe if he'd survived and truly committed to dismantling the system that he upheld and the narratives that he had ingrained in his head, maybe there could have been redemption. But that would have been his burden to carry, not ours to offer. And honestly, the show strongly suggests he never would have unpacked it. He deserved the opportunity to change. But I'm deeply skeptical of a culture so eager to make that path easy for him, and so unwilling to even tell Cintas. That double standard in the show's discourse says everything. As it stands, his final moments perfectly encapsulate everything about him. Cassian asks him,
Who are you?
and for the first time, Syril sees it. He made Cassian the center of his obsessive fantasy, his rival, his foil, the mirror for his own imagined greatness. But to Cassian, he's no one. Not even the antagonist of this story. Just a man so desperate to matter that he handed himself over to the machine. A discarded cog in a system that never cared. That's the tragedy. Not that he didn't get to change, but that he chose not to. He died in the very violence he helped create, consumed by the empire he worshipped. A willing tool begging to be useful until the very last moment. That's the answer to who are you? No one the story will remember. Because in true revolution, it is the Cintas who are held and remembered, and the Syrils who vanish like dust in the machine.